True Spy Stories by Terry Deary. True Detective Stories by Terry Deary. The Man Who Robbed Himself, page 9. The Man Who Robbed Himself. Police sometimes call on the help of experts to catch criminals, as an expert can also produce evidence which will prove a suspect is not to blame. But what happens when the police and the expert disagree? Can the expert turn detective to prove his case? Budapest, Hungary, 1938. Hanna Sulner sat down heavily at the restaurant table and looked at the man who was already seated there. "Sorry, Harry," she said. "I'm not going to be very good company today. I've had a bad day." Harry Urkel grinned. "So, you're going to take it out on me, yes?" The young woman stuck out her tongue and pulled her straight dark eyebrows together in a scowl. "Why not? You're a man, and men think they know everything." "We do," Harry said. "You know nothing," Hannah said. "I'm an expert. I am probably Hungary's greatest expert in the study of handwriting. The police call for my help a dozen times, but this time, when I give my opinion, they ignore me. They arrest an innocent man, destroy his wife's life, and practically tell me I am a fool or a liar. Well, I am not mistaken. I just wish I knew how to prove it," she said. "Who is this innocent man, and what did he do?" Harry asked gently. "He did nothing. That's what I'm telling you," Hannah replied. One or two of the customers in the restaurant looked up from their meals to see what she was so agitated about. She lowered her voice. "His name is Miklos, and he is accused of theft. He is the accountant for a small business in Budapest, and he is paid 1,000 forints a month. When he left work on the Friday evening before Christmas, there were 500,000 forints in the safe. When he returned after Christmas, the safe was empty." "How was the safe opened?" Harry asked. "It had been opened by someone who knew the combination lock numbers, and only 2 people knew those numbers, Miklos and the owner. There was only one set of fingerprints on the safe." "Don't tell me," Harry cut in. "They belonged to Miklos." "They did," Hannah said. "That's what they call an open and shut case," Harry shrugged. The young woman glared at him again. "Typical man, jumping to conclusions," she hissed. "The police didn't think they had enough evidence to arrest him. They made inquiries at the Budapest banks and made an important discovery. On the Monday after the robbery, a woman had paid nearly 500,000 forints into a bank account. She used the name Anna Nagy." "A common enough name," Harry said. "Unfortunately, it was the name of Miklos's wife before she married him," Hannah said. Harry thought carefully, in case he irritated the handwriting expert any more. "The police suppose he'd given the money to his wife and she'd paid it into a bank then?" "They did," Hannah agreed. "And, to make things worse, they went around to Miklos's house and discovered they'd bought a lot of new things for Christmas. A new radio, a pram for the baby Anna was expecting, new furniture for the nursery, and so on. They found receipts for 7,000 forints. "It looks bad for Miklos," Harry muttered. "The poor man had saved it. For 4 years he'd been saving. Then they had a spending spree, so they were all ready for the arrival of their first baby." Harry picked up a menu and studied it. "You have to admit it looks a bit unlikely. The police have arrested people on less evidence than that." Hannah nodded miserably. "Just soup for me. I'm not very hungry." "This case has really upset you, hasn't it?" Harry said. "Yes," she said, twisting the table napkin miserably. Miklos has had the most amazing bad luck. There were just 2 people who could prove that his wife hadn't paid that money into the bank, and one of those people was the bank cashier, of course. There was every chance that he would remember what the mysterious Anna Nagy looked like and tell the police that it wasn't Miklos's wife. "Don't tell me," Harry said. "He'd forgotten all about Anna Nagy." "Worse," Hannah said. "He'd suffered a heart attack at Christmas and died." "That is bad luck," Harry agreed. "So who was the other person who could prove Miklos's wife didn't make that payment?" Hannah looked up. "Why, me, of course. They had the paying-in slip for that 500,000 forints. It was signed Anna Nagy. The police asked Miklos's wife to sign that name. Then they gave both specimens to me to compare." "Don't tell me they were the same. His wife had done the robbery without telling him." Harry laughed. Hannah snapped. "Now you're being silly." "Sorry," the young man said. "Tell me about it." "The signatures were totally different. A blind person could see they were not written by the same person. They didn't need me to tell them that." "But you did," Harry put in. "But I did. The police didn't believe me. They didn't want to believe me. They said she had disguised her handwriting in case she was caught. Practically called me a liar. They pressed ahead with the charge and Miklos went to court yesterday." Harry ordered the meal from a waiter and sat back in his chair. "They didn't call you as a witness, then?" "The police didn't, but Miklos's lawyer did. I was able to tell them that the person who wrote that signature was a lot older than Miklos's wife. I was also able to tell them that she had some sort of physical problem with her writing, something that made writing difficult." "But the court didn't believe you either?" Harry asked. Hannah spread the napkin on her lap, then crumpled it again. "The police had an answer for that. They said that Miklos's wife would be agitated when she wrote it, nervous about trying to cash in on her husband's crime. They also said they had checked on all the women in Budapest who are registered under the name of Anna Nagy. There were 7 of them. They even put an advert in the newspapers for any other Anna Nagys to come forward if they had paid that money in legally. No one did." Harry Urkel was fond of Hannah and didn't want to upset her. He didn't tell her what he was really thinking, that her kind heart was trying to see the good in the accountant and wouldn't admit that he was in fact a thief. "Your only hope would be if there was an Anna Nagy who was in Budapest and was not registered." "It's possible," the young woman said shortly. "And if this Anna Nagy didn't read the papers," he added. "That's possible too," she said defiantly. "And if this Anna Nagy hasn't been back to the bank to touch any of that money?" "Look, I saw his wife this morning," Hannah argued. "She's distracted. The baby's been born to a father who's in jail for theft. She's ill with worry." Harry clicked his fingers. "Hey, have you thought about that? You said that Anna Nagy who signed the bank slip had a physical problem. Could she have been ill?" Hannah pulled a copy of the signature from her handbag and laid it flat on the tablecloth. She traced the shaking letters with her finger. "Yes, definitely, I should say." "So have you checked the hospitals? Maybe someone came into Budapest from outside, someone who isn't registered here, and paid the money into the bank, then went to hospital for some reason." Hannah's eyes widened. "Why didn't I think of that?" she whispered. "There are only 4 major hospitals in Budapest. I'll check them now." She jumped to her feet so quickly the white napkin fluttered to the floor. "But your soup!" Harry cried. Hannah didn't hear him. She was already out of the restaurant door and hurrying down the snow-dusted street. The first hospital that Hannah tried raised her hopes cruelly. She was shown into a ward where an Anna Nagy lay in bed. The young Anna smiled at Hannah and showed her the twin babies proudly. "Yes, I am registered in Budapest and the police have already asked me about the bank account. Sorry, it's nothing to do with me. Best of luck, she said. At the second hospital there was no Anna Nagy, but at the third the receptionist checked the list of names and said, "Yes, Ward 9, an old lady from Debrecen, near the Romanian border." "Will she see me?" Hannah said eagerly. "Ha!" the receptionist snorted. "She'll see you, but she won't see you very well. She's nearly blind. She came to Budapest for an eye operation. Seems she's been saving for years to have it done. By all means go and have a chat with her. Second ward on the left, third bed on the right." Hannah's heels clattered on the cold tile floors as she hurried towards Ward 9. The old woman in the third bed on the right seemed to be asleep. As Hannah sat in the wooden chair by the bedside, it creaked and old Anna stirred. "Is that you, nurse?" "No, Mrs. Nagy?" "That's me. My name's Hannah Sulner. I'm from the university. I wondered if you could help me by answering a few questions." "I'll try. Just pass me that pair of spectacles, would you?" she said. "They don't help much yet, but my eyes are getting better every day, thanks to the doctors here. I'll be able to read again soon." "Mrs. Nagy," Hannah said as she passed the old woman the heavy glasses, "did you bring much money with you from Debrecen?" "Nearly 500,000 forints," she replied, squinting through the glasses at the young woman. "And you paid it into the National Bank on Bartok Street?" "As soon as I arrived in Budapest," the old woman said. "And that was when?" "On Christmas Eve." Hannah struggled to keep the tremble of excitement from her voice. "Mrs. Nagy, I'll explain everything to you in a moment, but could I ask you to do just one thing for me? Would you sign your name on this blank slip of paper?" There's the signature. "The signatures matched, of course," Harry Urkel said a week later. They were sitting in the same restaurant. "Of course," Hannah said happily. "You were right and the police were wrong." "Of course. What else could you expect from a bunch of simple men?" she asked wickedly. Harry looked a little hurt. "I seem to remember it was a simple man who gave you the idea of checking the hospitals for Anna Nagy." Hannah Sulner was enjoying her meal this time. Her appetite had returned. "Some men are a little less stupid," she admitted, "but you don't get much more stupid than the police." "They've released Miklos, haven't they?" he asked. "That's not good enough," Hannah said. "They only released him because some of the evidence was weakened by finding the real Mrs. Nagy. Miklos could still have stolen that money. People would still have suspected him. Mud sticks. The police had to find out who did steal the cash." "So what is the answer?" Harry asked. "Work it out for yourself," Hannah said playfully as she tore a piece from her bread roll and chewed it. Harry dabbed at his mouth with the napkin to buy some time. Then a corner of his mouth turned up in a smile. It spread to his eyes. "Only 2 people knew the combination to the safe, Miklos and his boss. If Miklos didn't steal the money, then it must have been his boss." "That's what I told the police," Hannah said. And they arrested Miklos's boss last night. He admitted everything. He crept back into the office over that Christmas weekend. He wore gloves so he left no fingerprints. He opened the safe and took out the 500,000 forints. Then he claimed on the insurance, and the insurance company paid him the 500,000 he said he'd lost." Harry gave a soft whistle. "He made a cool 1,000,000 forints by robbing himself. Miklos was lucky he had you on the case." "No," Hannah frowned. "Miklos was very unlucky. Unlucky that his wife was born Anna Nagy. Unlucky that the bank clerk died before the police could question him. And unlucky that he chose to spend his savings at just the wrong time. Even the police might have solved the case quicker if it hadn't been for Miklos's bad luck." or if they'd had you on the police force. You'd make a brilliant detective. Ever thought of joining the force?" Hannah raised her glass of wine and sipped it. "Why should I?" she said, and her eyes sparkled like the bubbling wine. "I'm already a brilliant handwriting expert. For a woman." That's a pretty cool story. That's the end of the story.
Gotta read
Fact file. Fingerprints fact file. The police forces of the world rely heavily on experts to help with their detective work. Sometimes the experts are employed just when they are needed. Doctors, for example. Others are employed as full-time policemen and women, fingerprint specialists or photographers. Detectives can track down suspects, but it is often the experts whose evidence leads to an arrest and a court conviction. 1. Fingerprints, those patterns of ridges on the tips of human fingers, are different for every human being. Even identical twins have different fingerprints. 2. Detectives always hope to find a fingerprint at the scene of a crime. If they can match it to the finger pattern of a suspect, then they can prove that person was there, even if the criminal says he or she wasn't. 3. Fingerprints last for life or even longer. Egyptian mummies have fingerprints and they are 3,000 years old. 4. If the fingerprints are burned or rubbed off, the same pattern of prints will grow back. In 1934, the American gangster John Dillinger paid doctors to perform plastic surgery on his fingertips. It failed. Friends suggested he dip his fingers in acid. This worked for a while, but by the time he was caught, the patterns reappeared. Another gangster, Robert Pitts, had skin transplanted from his chest to his fingertips. This got rid of the fingerprints, but he was convicted on other evidence, and the doctor who operated on his fingers went to jail too. 5. The ancient Chinese knew how to identify people from their fingerprints. They used a thumbprint in wax as a signature that couldn't be forged. 6. In 1892, the English scientist Sir Francis Galton wrote the first book on fingerprints. They were first used as evidence in the same year in a Brazilian murder case where the fingerprint was made in the victim's blood. Experiments then showed that fingers leave their invisible pattern on hard, smooth surfaces, and special powder can be used to make the patterns show up. Police no longer had to hope the criminal would leave a visible print. 7. Millions of people have been convicted on fingerprint evidence since that first case in 1892. In one classic case in 1948, the police in Blackburn, Northern England, created a record when they fingerprinted 46,253 men to catch a killer. 8. It is possible to fake fingerprint evidence. In a 1943 case, police in the Bahamas made an arrest after claiming they had found a fingerprint at a murder scene. Then the accused man's own private detective proved that the police had transplanted his print from a drinking glass to the scene of the crime. He was released. 9. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, of the United States keeps fingerprint records and now holds about 173 million people on its fingerprint files. 10. Fingerprints should be a foolproof way of proving someone is guilty or innocent of a crime. Unfortunately, fingerprint experts can make mistakes. Working 8 hours a day studying those tiny marks needs great concentration. Mistakes have been made and innocent people have ended up in prison. Fingerprints may be foolproof, but the people who read them aren't. Fingerprints can't be copied easily. Handwriting can. Police use handwriting specialists like Hannah Sulner for advice, but don't consider their evidence to be absolute proof. Handwriting experts can often disagree with one another. That's what happened in a famous kidnapping case. And that's the end of the story. Hope you enjoyed. With lots of love from us.